Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I'm doing a video response of sorts. This is kind of an answer or something I was thinking about. After a week or so ago, I watched the Immortal John Hancock. He did a video that sort of hit a nerve for me, and I thought, I really need to talk about this. I did make a comment on his video, but he's a big YouTuber, so I'm not really surprised he hasn't really seen my comment. So I thought, no, I'm going to do it as a video response and maybe see what other people think. And it's difficult for me to say this without sounding like a jerk. So I'm going to try my best to couch this in the right way because it's intended to be an answer to something. Okay, so what happened? John Hancock did a video talking about how there's much stuff in the news these days about how GameStop and therefore EB Games or whatever, I think Game in the UK, these are all part of the same network of companies and stuff. And the big headline is GameStop is in trouble. They're dying. They're going out of business. We need to do something to fix this up is kind of what all the news is about. And, you know, the GameStop themselves have actually, they've got some ideas, some little notions, projects in the hopper to maybe fix that up, which I'll talk about. But John Hancock's video was basically saying if GameStop dies, it's going to be bad for gamers. That's true, but this is hardly the first time. And that's sort of what kind of got my mind thinking about this. So GameStop, they are basically trying to sell physical games, and nobody's buying those in the same numbers they used to. Most sales are digital now, or if not, that's the trend. They're moving toward being digital sales. So what can GameStop do to combat that? Well, they were doing used games for a while for $5 cheaper than brand new retail, and that was not a practice I liked. I lost a lot of respect for the company during that whole thing and the online codes and all that kind of stuff. I won't get into that. So for me, suffice to say that the death of GameStop would not necessarily be the saddest thing in the world as far as I'm concerned. And John's perspective, I admire it, and I appreciate it, and I respect it. And he has some very valid points, things that I'm going to also address here that I hadn't really thought about before, but it doesn't negate my I don't care if they go away perspective. Again, it sounds like I'm being a jerk here. So yes, the way that GameStop is thinking about combating this, I mean, already you can see it. If you ever go into one of these stores now, they're 75% of the shelves are all merchandise and t-shirts and hats and hoodies and towels and things that they sell at a ThinkGeek and, you know, all of those kind of measuring cups and, you know, just silly items, bobbleheads. They don't really sell games as much anymore. Okay, that's unfortunate, sure. That's, I guess, not working because their stock has tanked. It's down to something like $5 now. They've laid off a whole bunch of management positions. I think it's not going to be long till stores close. Yeah, it's bad if you're a GameStop employee or somebody who really likes the GameStop business. It's not going to look too rosy in the future. So maybe GameStop's going to think about going into retro games full time, you know, a dedicated GameStop store that just sells retro titles. Okay, anybody who's gone to something like the Retro Gaming Expo recently will definitely verify you have a big problem in the world of people love old retro games like myself and want to buy them, and that's awesome, and I'm glad new generations of kids are all getting into Atari and the Super NES and all that kind of stuff, and the Master System. But the issue is that Pat the NES Punk actually said it really well on his completely unnecessary podcast, the CU podcast. Sometimes this subject comes up and he just said it perfectly. He's like, you're talking about a finite supply to begin with. Never mind the new interest in games. You're talking about there's only so many retro cartridges and CDs and various other things out there to begin with. Now you've got a lot of people collecting and you've got a new generation wanting to collect. So supply, which was finite to begin with, has shrunk and demand is skyrocketing. That's why stuff that used to cost $10, like Darkstalkers for the PlayStation 1, that I walked right past once at my local retro store, and now is $30 plus every time I see it. Anyway, that's why the prices are going up. That's why it's becoming harder to get into the kind of hobby now. So if if GameStop, that's what the US version is, if they go into that, that's going to kill it for any small companies that are doing it, like my local retro store. Also, how well are they going to handle that? Like, it's full of problems. The whole idea of GameStop going into retro game sales, not really ideal. And they've had a few mishaps, and you can research that yourself. So that I don't think is going to be their answer. John Hancock did bring up a very good point about how the death of GameStop, if it happens, will be bad for gamers, especially with regards to if you've got like a little independent store that you buy your stuff from, whether retro or otherwise. If they've got anything relatively modern on their shelves, because like my retro store does, it's got PS4, Xbox One, Switch. Yeah, I think it's got Switch stuff now. Where do they get that stuff? They actually go to EB Games or GameStop and they buy the stuff. Like, not in huge quantities, but that's how they supply themselves, is through places like that. So if the company goes away, that's actually going to impact and hurt your local mom and pop kettle little retro or otherwise gaming store. So that was sort of John's point, is that, hey, this would be terrible if this went. Think about it. Don't everybody celebrate the death of this company that's had some pretty questionable practices with their sales, but whatever. And what was my point on all of that? Well, I was watching John's video going, yeah, you're right, that's true. It would be terrible for gamers. Just like when arcades died in 1983. Like, this is not something new for gamers in general. We are used to dips and valleys and heights and, mountain peaks. The whole the whole gaming world throughout its history has gone through peaks and valleys. That's the word I was looking for. It's been really great. Like in the early 80s, the golden age of the arcade scene was fantastic. And then you had a glut of too many of the same types of machines, and so it kind of dipped. Nobody went anymore. Some games are starting to become expensive. Hey, wait a minute, Dragon's Lair is 50 cents? Whoa, hold on a second. That's a lot of money. So it started to dip. Then things like Street Fighter brought it back. It's like, hey, yeah, the arcades are cool again and stuff. But it's sort of, and I don't want to say it's cyclical. Like, I don't think this is like, oh, this is just normal pattern for the gaming world. Don't worry about it. But my point is, anybody who's sad at the death of one particular chapter in gaming, I think is maybe not remembering the history of gaming that well. It has gone through periods where companies have gone under. I would love, and this is the very crux of my argument. I have often said to people when they talk about, oh, isn't it terrible GameStop or whatever, gaming in general is dying, or some big companies like THQ who made the Saints Row games that I love, they went out of business, I think, or they sold the title. Anyway, they are not the same THQ they were when they were making Saints Row that I loved. And everybody was like, oh, lament the passing of this great game company. It's like, yeah, sure, but I would love nothing more than to be able to go down to the shopping mall, walk into an arcade, plunk a quarter in, and play some pinball. I can't. I haven't been able to for decades. Yes, I know there are pinball machines in like real venues like movie theaters and some, I think when on a cruise ship there was some pinball machines there, but very niche. Very niche. Not in like your local laundromat like they used to be. And that's because the gaming scene has changed. The technology has replaced it. You can't just live in that little bubble of time and think nothing's ever going to impact it. That's not the way the real world works. Like, not just a capitalism thing, but just business in general is very much like if there's something that should be going away because technology has replaced it, it needs to go away. We can't have this vacuum of like reinforcing something just so that the thing that we like stays around. It doesn't work that way. I'd love to go to the arcade. I'd love to be able to do that thing that I did back in the 80s. I can't. there have been a few small attempts. There's barcades, and I've seen like small businesses trying to start up where they're, you know, heavily subsidized by the town government to kind of, you know, we're trying to boost some business in this area, so we're going to really subsidize the fact that your company not making any money, but at least you've got a business in place. So yeah, run a pinball store. Okay, cool. I don't think that's going to last. And for me, as a kid, very often when I would be lamenting in the 80s, oh, my favorite arcade is gone. What's happened? Or it's replaced with like Dance Dance Revolution machines. I would sit there and I'd be crying in the sink about, you know, this is terrible. The things that I love are gone. And it's like, yeah, well, suck it up, princess. That's the way business works. If you don't, if those companies can't keep their doors open with the lack of people going into play, it's not going to be around. So too bad. Wake up. You have to move on. But where am I going to play Pac-Man? You can play Pac-Man at home. You mean the Atari 2600 version? That thing's junk. That's not Pac-Man. That's not the one that I really want to play. That's very admirable and nice and cute and stuff, but that's the Pac-Man that you're going to be stuck with. And that was a bitter pill to take back in the 80s. Like I was feeling back then the way John and various others are feeling now. It's like, oh no, don't take away my GameStop. Now, the technology does replace this stuff. Like in the case of Pac-Man, it would seem silly back then, but I could imagine a time traveler coming up to my younger self and saying, kid, don't worry. One day, you're going to be able to play Pac-Man exactly the way it is in the arcade, not that 2600 game. You're going to be able to play it exactly the way it was in the arcade on your television set for free. Well, you know, buy the disc. I would have thought they're crazy. No, it exists. And in fact, you've got it on your phone nowadays. Like all of these things, the technology has come along and it has progressed and it has changed that stuff. And you can't just dig in your heels and say, no, I want the arcade to always be around forever and ever. Don't take it away from me. That's not reality. So the same thing applies, unfortunately, to GameStop. Yeah, there's a nostalgic kind of connection, I guess. I mean, how many of you have actually been into a GameStop, EB Games, game store recently? Like, what's your most recent experience? Do you buy a lot of games in the store? Probably not. I think most of us buy, if we do anything, it's retro old stuff in a little mom and pop retro store, not EB Games, like GameStop. Sorry, I keep wanting to say EB Games because that's kind of their name here in Canada. Anyway, another example, and this is more recent and as sad, if not sadder, if you ask me, is what about Toys R Us? Like, that's a store that little children are supposed to be able to go into and see all these wonderful aisles of toys and just be in this amazing wonderland and, wow, Mom, can I get that? You know, the joy of childhood is very much connected to toy stores, and Toys R Us was that for decades. It wasn't around for my generation, but I acknowledge from a distance, yeah, Toys R Us was that thing. It's dead. Or dying. I mean, there's a couple of them left here in Canada, but I think it's closed across the United States. And, I mean, yeah, people have been lamenting that. That's terrible. That's sad. And it is to misquote John Hancock, it's the death of Toys R Us is bad for children. Sure. But there's Amazon, there's eBay, there are sources, there's lots of different places you can buy stuff online, and honestly, you can get the version of what you're looking for a lot better, faster, cheaper than if you went into Toys R Us. Case in point, I was going to get a dinosaur for my nephew when I went to visit a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh yeah, a little toy dinosaur. I'll just get that in Toys R Us. Yeah, they had like a giant pack of dinosaurs for $30. I was like, I just want one please. They didn't have it. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that's one of those sort of basic primary toys, like a sailing boat or a railroad sort of train. Oh, on the very subject, let's go back a century. I'm sure back in the 1800s, as you know, playing Red Dead Redemption 2 has recently just reminded me, The railroad tycoons were very happy to be sitting there, sucking back all that money that they were earning off the railroads, because it was like, well, aren't any alternatives? So yeah, we're living life large. We're having a great time, and I'm sure some of their business practices were shady. Guess what? Technology moved on. We found other routes of transportation. Airplanes and cars took over a lot of that, and trucking stuff through the highways. The trains are quaint, and I still use it to go to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. And my brother-in-law works on the train system, so I'm by no means saying bad things about trains now. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying as a historical context, the train system used to be king of the hill, and now it's this little side niche transport thing that is very nice and very much appreciated by me. But that's the way technology works. If a market dies, the business is going to go away, or it's going to adapt and modify and change. And that happened with arcades. They went away. So I'm very sad at the possible passing away of EB Games / GameStop. But my response to John Hancock is, I'm sorry it's happening, but it's not like we can do anything about it. This is life. This is the way the business works. And for anybody who wants to argue against me, fine. Where's the arcade that I can go and plunk a quarter in and play pinball machine then? Because I want that. I want to relive those days. But I was told by sort of the big grown-up world, sorry kid, that ain't happening anymore. GameStop as well. It ain't happening anymore. It's all moving digital. Or you've got new things like Stadia, which are going to completely get rid of all the media and the consoles as well. I don't think that's going to work, but if it doesn't work now, and OnLive tried to do it 5-10 years ago, if it doesn't exist yet, if there's still too many problems with it, then sure, that's fine. Those are going to be overcome. Eventually, the Stadia dream is going to happen. You're going to get fiber optic everywhere. People are going to be able to just plug in a connector or a controller into some box or into their TV or wirelessly or whatever, and they're going to be able to play games that are the highest frame rate, the fastest machines. It's going to happen. This is the world we live in, and unfortunately, it's a wake-up call to everybody. Don't dig in your heels like the railroad tycoons or like unfortunately, like Toys R Us. This is all going away. It's the very nature, the ebb and flow of business and technology. That's the way it happens. So, again, I don't want this to come across like I'm being a jerk. I'm not. I am sad for those people that work for GameStop and are possibly going to lose their job, and I feel sorry for the retail spaces that are going to lose that, and I feel for people who want to go in and just browse and see what's the latest and greatest, or parents who don't really know this stuff very well and don't know how to order online. You can just walk in and say, oh, there's that Mario game my son talked about. I'll buy that. That's going away, and that is unfortunate, but the business has evolved to that state, and we can't maintain this older system anymore. I hope I don't regret that someday. I hope there isn't going to be something that replaces part of my life that I'm going to be crying in the sink over. Well, whatever. We'll worry about that later. Anyway, so that's my video response to the Immortal John Hancock. I do very much appreciate his point. I respect what he's saying, and especially he did open my eyes about how little independent stores are relying on places like GameStop to supply their modern stuff. So, yes, concerned, and that is very sad. But that's life. That's the way it works. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.